Okay, so we'll get started. Hi, I'm Anna. My pronouns are she, her, and we're very excited to have the Heat Pump 101 and information session today. This event is organized by Climate Fast, and we are a local community climate group here in Toronto. And we're involved in a very diverse range of climate action across all three levels of government, but with a special focus at the moment on local municipal level of government at the city. So we're really excited to have Michelle Hjort with us from Energy Neighbour to help us learn more about what heat pumps are and how they work. Energy Neighbour is a service that helps connect homeowners with experts who can guide people through the energy retrofitting process. So the plan for the next hour is to start off with a presentation from Michelle on heat pumps. And then afterwards, we'll go into a Q&A session where Talia, the Q&A moderator, will ask a few questions to start us off, and then we'll open it up for anyone else to ask questions that they have. Before we go into the presentation, here is a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge the sacred land on which we live and meet today. Right now, I'm in Toronto. This land has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years and is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Last week, an article came out in the CBC where a new mercury health treatment facility was opened in response to the destructive health impacts of the mercury poisoning faced by Grassy Narrows First Nation. 90% of residents in Grassy Narrows First Nation has been impacted by mercury poisoning that dates back to the 1960s and 70s, when the Dryden paper mill dumped about 9 tons of the toxin into the English Wabigoon River system in northwestern Ontario. Today, the Dryden paper mill is still operating, and a study last year in 2024 from Western University suggests the river's contamination is being made worse by ongoing industrial pollution. So if you would like to read more about this ongoing issue, I'm just going to put a link to the for more information in the chat here. And some of you may know this, but next Saturday on March 22nd, it's World Water Day, according to the United Nations. And in relation to this and Indigenous rights and sovereignty, there are some events coming up. So there is an online webinar next Thursday, March 20th at 7 p.m. By, I think it's like the Labor of Canadian Council or something like that. I can't remember, but I will put the link in the chat if you're interested in this online webinar on Thursday. And then the following day after that, on Friday, March 21st, from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., there's a panelist discussion on ending Line 5 Canada called Seeding Sovereignty and Water Justice at the University of Toronto's Hart House. So if you're interested in attending that event next Friday, that's at the University of Toronto. That link is also just being added in the chat. So feel free to attend those and sign up for them ahead of time. So this brings us to the presentation now. I will pass it over to Michelle to talk about heat pumps.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. There has been a lot of difficult news lately about what's going on in the world around climate, with what's happening in the US. So it's very nice to be able to have this conversation with you about a way that we can each be empowered in our own homes. Like the biggest single action we can take to reduce our emissions is to get a heat pump. Or if you drive a lot, it might be to get an EV, but for most of us, it's to get a heat pump. So really great to be able to share some information tonight and then be able to answer your questions. So ideally, you'll feel afterwards that you have the basic knowledge that you need to think about getting a heat pump for your own home. I think be ready to put up the slides unless there's going to be any further introductions. Okay. So Heat Pumps 101, and thanks so much to Climate Fast for hosting this. As we said, at Energy Neighbor, we provide one-on-one guidance to help owners do clean energy retrofits. It's no cost guidance, and we help you understand your technology options, understand the loans and rebates that are available for you, and refer you to great contractors. Next. So as you know, why is it that we're working on this issue? You guys at Climate Fast have made this your mission, so you really understand. But our homes are still primarily heated with fossil fuels, and 17 to 20% of emissions everywhere come from buildings. And then if you're in the city, it's higher than that, and we're in a dense city. So it's a big problem, but it's also a tremendous opportunity for us to feel empowered to do something. Next. So yeah, so what can you do? You can decarbonize your house. Next. The main things that you can do in your home would be the gas appliances that you might have would be to switch from a furnace or a boiler to a heat pump, to switch your gas hot water over to electric, to switch your gas stove to an induction stove or a regular electric stove, and then potentially to add solar panels, which is the one thing of these retrofits that actually pays you, and then helps offset the increased electricity that you'd have. And in addition to these, you might think about doing some air sealing or insulating or improving the envelope of your home as well. Next. And this is largely, as I said, the biggest thing that you can do on your own to reduce your emissions is to get a heat pump. And this is recognized by international bodies as well. So the International Energy Agency and almost all climate action plans that you'll see all over the world at the federal, provincial, and local level are really encouraging people to get heat pumps. And the big issue is that we only have the opportunity every, 15 to 20 years when our furnace might fail. So it's really important to, when you have a furnace or boiler that's getting old, to anticipate a heat pump and get ready for it, and even perhaps be proactive about it. Because if you wait, 85% of people wait until it fails, and then you might be there on a very cold day starting to do your research. And that's not great as your house is getting colder and colder, because it's not as easy as just swapping it out. You might be tempted to get a furnace then, because that's a swap out. But the heat pump, you've got to check your electrical, and you have to make sure you get the right size and determine where the outdoor unit is going to go. So there's a few additional steps to take. Next. But the advantages of a heat pump are significant. And we are talking about reducing emissions and fighting climate change, but heat pumps actually make for a more comfortable home. So they run with an inverter. The cold climate heat pumps do, which we should all be getting cold climate heat pumps. So your furnace is typically single stage or dual stage, meaning it's just either off or on. But the heat pump can go all the way down to 30% of capacity and then incrementally all the way up. So the goal is that it's running continuously at the right level, as opposed to blasting on and then off like your furnace would do. So if it's running continuously at a lower level, it has time for the heat to permeate the far corners of the room and the walls and the furniture, and it makes for a much cozier heat. It's not as hot, but it's more even. And you don't have where our typical oversized furnace, they blast on, they hit the thermostat temperature, and then they go off, and then you wait for the temperature to drop for them to rise again. Where the heat pump has this consistent, cozy temperature, which people who have heat pumps really like. So if you know somebody who has one, ask them, and chances are they'll tell you that they really like that part of it. And they maybe weren't even realizing that they were going to get that benefit. And then the other is lifetime cost savings. So on average, if you're switching from natural gas, your savings aren't going to be huge, maybe 15% of your total energy bill. If you're switching from oil or propane, it will be a huge saving. And if you're switching from electric baseboard, it will be about 1/3 the cost of electric baseboards. Next. So how heat pumps work, they really are the same. You actually already have heat pump in your home. Your refrigerator is one, and your freezer is one, and your air conditioner is one. These are all heat pumps, but the kind that also do heating have a reversing valve. So basically, when they are in cooling mode, they are pulling the heat from inside of your house, compressing it, pushing it outside, and then evaporating it to outside. And and then they reverse when in the winter they're pulling heat from outside, compressing it, which raises the temperature, bringing it in and evaporating it. And you might say, but Michelle, there's how could it get heat outside when it's cold out? But if the refrigerant is minus 90 and it's minus 20 outside, you still have a 70-degree heat differential, and it's still a heat sink. Though it's true that it's less efficient. So the colder it is outside, the less efficient it is. But on average, it's still right around like 270% efficient, or for every 1 unit of electricity, it's giving you 2.7 units of heat. And that is much better than like a baseboard heat is 1 for 1, 1 unit of electricity, 1 unit of heat. And our furnaces, our best furnaces are 96% efficient. So they're not even 1 to 1. Next. So there's a lot of types of heat pumps, and just to help kind of clarify the difference, what we're doing a lot here in Toronto is switching to air source heat pumps. So when you get rid of your gas furnace, you put in an air source heat pump. It's a pretty straightforward swap. But there are also ground source heat pumps, and this kind of confuses people because sometimes they're called geothermal or geo exchange. But that's where it's using the even temperature of the earth. And then there's also air to water heat pumps for people with hydronic systems. Next. So to just give you a little bit of an overview, the ground source heat pumps, not a lot of these done in Toronto. They can be done, ground source can be done either with a horizontal loop or a vertical loop. And as you could, if you're out in a more rural area, you might be able to do a horizontal loop because you need a fair amount of land for that. Then you can go down 6 feet or so where it's a consistent temperature. In urban areas, you're going to need to do vertical drilling. But there definitely are in Toronto people who've done vertical drilling in their driveway, 3 boreholes. So that is possible. Ground source heat pumps are fantastic because of the consistent temperature year round, and the infrastructure lasts for 100 years. However, they're more expensive, so the upfront cost is higher. It's around $20,000 for just the drilling, and that can be prohibitive. However, for people who do this at a forever home or like at a cottage that they know is going to be in their family for a long time, they consider it to be an excellent investment. Next. And then there's also air to water heat pumps. So in Toronto, a lot of us have cast iron radiators and with a boiler, and it's called a hydronic system because you're heating water and moving it through. There are air to water heat pumps where the outdoor unit is extracting the heat from the air, but then it is using a heat exchanger to put it in water. And then that water can go throughout your home into either rads or into usually heated floors. However, there's a few challenges with this. One, they're not common yet in Ontario, so the prices are very high and not a lot of knowledgeable installers. So we're really hoping to see that shift over the next year or so even, and get that price down and get more experienced installers so that we can make this available. The other issue is that the water temperature is lower on these than what we're used to putting into our cast iron rads. So sometimes if you have a really leaky home, it could be an issue. So you might need to tighten up your home first, and then you can also get more efficient rads if you want, but then that's an additional cost. Next. And so the air source heat pump is the one that is most commonly being installed here. And among those, there's a few different kinds. So the centrally ducted is the obvious choice for if you have a centrally ducted furnace. You're going to put that heat pump in, and like you see in the left photo there, it looks a lot like a furnace. The furnace goes out, the heat pump comes in, and it attaches to the existing ductwork. There could be a little bit of ductwork changing to be done, but for the most part, it can just be swapped right in there. And then the middle photo is showing the outdoor unit, kind of like an air conditioner, except for a slightly different shape. And that is pulling the heat or pushing the heat. It's moving the heat and bringing it into through refrigerant lines to the centrally ducted system. And then the photo on the right is a hybrid heat pump. And this is using the existing furnace. And then see that A coil on the bottom. It looks an awful lot like the refrigerator coil, except for, like we said, it has a reversing valve. And that coil sits on top. In this case, you can see the box for it, but sometimes it's right in the ductwork. And it can just replace the air conditioner. So you pull out the air conditioner A coil and put that in. But what's cool is now it's doing both heating and cooling. And where this hybrid might make sense is, say you have a furnace that's only a couple of years old, and you think, boy, I don't want to just throw that in the garbage. It's got a lot of good years in it left. But if you pair it with the heat pump uses the blower and the fan from the furnace, which then blows over those coils, and it will provide most of the heating for the house and all of the cooling. And depending on how it's sized, it could even provide all of the heating. But you're now able to get all of the benefits of the heat pump, even though you still have a furnace. Next. And then there's also the ductless air source heat pumps. So these have a similar outside unit, but the refrigerant lines, you can see those black tubes going up the wall, and then those are going to go, you're going to drill a 3-inch hole right in where that wall mounted unit that you see goes indoors. Now, these can be good for sometimes people with cast iron rads will switch over to a ductless system. If there is no ductwork, sometimes if there's an addition, people put these in. Sometimes they'll put them in an upstairs room where the heating and cooling has a hard time reaching. And so there's a number of reasons that you might do ductless. One advantage is that they're controlled at the unit. So if you've got three of these in 3 different rooms, each of them is controlled separately, like have its own thermostat, which is kind of nice. It can be a real advantage, say, for a basement apartment or something where it's got its own separate thermostat. And the wall mounted is the most common one, and usually those are placed high on the wall. But you see also the middle photo of the ceiling cassette. So that can be tucked up into the ceiling. And it's still, it's got the refrigerant lines going outside. You just have to have a place to put it, like if you have a dropped ceiling or in a closet or something. And then there's also a floor unit. So people are just familiar with those, but sometimes for our Toronto houses that are 1.5 stories or 2.5, that upstairs, the 3rd floor, for instance, with the knee walls actually doesn't really have, well, you can see it behind me. I'm in a room with knee walls. There isn't actually enough room to put heat pumps in those spaces behind me. So a floor unit could be a good option for ductless. In these, you can put up to 4 heads on one outdoor unit, but it's actually kind of better to put less on one outdoor unit if you can. It's more efficient. And the heads can be, the smallest one can be 6,000 BTU, and they can go up from there. Next. So there's also heat pump water heaters. And as we are electrifying our house, most of us have gas water heaters, as that's getting older, you want to replace that with an electric one. And you can just use a regular electric tank, and that's a workhorse, and it's just fine. And we recommend doing that with a timer so that you heat it at night, when electric rates are lower and when you're not using gas plant electricity. But the heat pump water heater is a pretty great option. It is 350% efficient. So for every unit of electricity, 350, like 3.5 units of heat. So the efficiency of it is fantastic. Some of the reasons that it could be a challenge in your home is that they're taller. So with some of our low Toronto basements, it might not fit, and it needs space around it. It is actually pulling heat from the surrounding area. And you might say, well, geez, why would I heat my home and then pull the heat from the surrounding area? and it does lower the temperature of the space by about a degree or a degree and a half. However, because of its incredible efficiency, the math of it still works out that it's a good value. And it does provide some dehumidification in the summer as well, or year round, but summer benefit. So it is also a higher upfront cost. So it will pay for itself over its lifetime because of that incredible efficiency. And it is the more people in your house using water, like this faster it will pay for it. So that's a consideration. And the other thing to know about it is that you can use the loan, the federal loan, the city loan, or the provincial rebates. There's a $500 rebate for this, so it does help offset the increased cost. Where the regular conventional water heater is not eligible for the loan or the rebate because it's not considered an energy retrofit. Next. There's also heat pump dryers. So this is my dryer that I'm showing. Just another consideration that if your dryer's reaching end of life, this is also super efficient. You can see the EnerGuide label on the right. It doesn't vent to outside, so you're not wasting all of that moist, hot air. It actually recirculates it, which is part of why it's so efficient. And really nice to not have that hole in your wall and gives you more options for where you could place it. Next. Now, people often ask about heat pump brands, of course, and it can be a little bit confusing, but the Japanese were the ones who innovated on cold climate heat pumps. And so they were the leaders. Mitsubishi, Fujitsu, and Daikin have all make excellent cold climate heat pumps, and they've been doing it for a long time. Then there's two giant Chinese companies, Gree and Midea, and they make practically everything else. And then the different companies put their labels on them. So a number of brands that you would recognize, they did not get up to speed with heat pump technology. So they just simply have these Chinese companies make them for them and put their label on it. So, for instance, Carrier, Mover, Mitser, Panasonic, those are all made by Midea. Except interestingly, Carrier, its top of the line one is made in the US, but its lower ones are made by Midea. And then Gree also makes like Bosch. People are like, oh, Bosch, they're so good. It's like, well, yeah, the the dishwasher, but their heat pump is made by Gree. So what I would say is what's much more important than the brand is having a good installer who is experienced and like I can refer you to good installers. I can't tell you how important it is. Heat pumps are amazing unless they're poorly installed, and then they're not. And there's bad installations give heat pumps a bad name, but it's also really unpleasant to have that happen, of course. So you need to make sure, even some of the HVAC companies that have a good reputation for, generally speaking, they don't know how to do heat pumps. So really make sure you get one who has done a lot of installations that are the same as yours. And then maybe go with the brands that they recommend. They'll probably say they'll probably do like one Japanese, like say Mitsubishi or Fujitsu, and then they might do a Midea, and they'll have different price points. And then, but those are the ones they're experienced in installing. So I would go with one of those. And I can say that the Midea heat pumps are good. Like they copied the Japanese technology quite effectively. The performance specifications on them are solid. However, this last cold snap was a bit of a test, and I did know, like, people with the Mitsubishi and Fujitsu, they had no complaints, and there were a few installation issues with Midea, but it seemed to me it was more because they got bad installations. Like the not as good installers install the less expensive stuff. So just FYI, you got to get a good installer. Next. All right, and so part of getting a good installation, like I said, you need to ask for references, and you need to make sure that they were heat pump references. They need to make sure you need somebody who's super detail oriented, who's going to make sure that the refrigerant lines are properly brazed and that they're completely clean before the refrigerant goes in. They need to put in the right amount of refrigerant. And it's really, for people who are experienced, it's not that hard, but it's just that they need to know what they're doing. And then the other piece is the correct sizing. So with furnaces in the past, they would just oversize. It was kind of an insurance policy. Just put in something big and it'll be fine. But heat pumps are, it's not good for them to be oversized, particularly for cooling because they won't dehumidify as well. So you really don't want them to be oversized. And then also they're kind of limited by the ductwork. So you don't want to put a big heat pump on small ducts. It'll make the fan blower fail sooner. Next. And again, with ductwork, you need to make sure that the installer is measuring your ductwork and is checking the static pressure, which means that like how much resistance there is in there. And then one of the things that we found that's been super helpful is there's a product called AeroSeal, and it's a separate company, but they come in and they seal your ducts by spraying in this non-toxic almost like a glue type thing that finds all of the cracks and holes up to the size of a loonie. And the average improvement is 30 to 40% improvement in airflow. And I've had homeowners who were like, this second floor bedroom has never got heating and cooling before in the 20 years we've lived here. Now all of a sudden it does. So they'll find too, like if a joint between sections has come apart, they'll be able to tell that because the system won't pressurize, and so then they'll take their thermal camera and be able to see where it's leaking and can go and repair. So it's definitely, sometimes it goes hand in hand with a heat pump to make sure that you've got your ducts sealed so that all of that cool and warm air can make its way to its destination. Next. And the other big one is the panel upgrade. So it used to be and some electricians still will say like, oh, you're getting a heat pump, you need a 200 amp panel. And that's just not true. So most of our Toronto homes have 100 amp panel, and we have supported a whole bunch of homeowners to completely electrify on 100 amps. Like even EV charger and such. Where you might need an upgrade is if you have, say, a full basement apartment with all the appliances, or if you have like a hot tub, or if you have a sauna, or if you have a kiln or something like that. But for most people, you can do it. And even if you're getting close, there's things like load sharing devices or splitters. Like they have this really cool EV charger that will detect if your home's at 80% and then the EV charger will just pause. So if somebody turns on the dryer and the microwave and the blow dryer and everything all at once, the EV will just pause and then start when it's done, which is great because a panel upgrade is like $5,000. So to avoid that is a good thing. And they also have now like load sharing devices. So you could put your backup coils from the heat pump on with, say, your dryer, and only one of them can go at a time, but usually the backup coils are happening in the wee hours of the coldest morning, and that's you're not running your dryer there. So, as we're electrifying, there's a lot of cool things that are happening with innovation around smart panels and being able to manage load and all of that. So we're going to see some pretty neat things happen over the next few years, and they're available now too. They're a little expensive. Next. Now, so the rebates, new rebates just came out on January 28th. However, they weren't really all that new. They were sort of a repackaging of the current ones with a few tweaks. And what's been a bit crazy is they marketed it as $7,500 rebates. And that's really a bit deceptive because that would be for homes that are fully electric resistance heated, and that would be the biggest heat pump, like 6 tons, which really I've never even seen one. So what's typical for those of us whose homes are heated with gas is that the average size heat pump is 2.5 tons, and that will be $1,250 rebate, which is still nice. But when you were thinking 7,500, it might feel a little disappointing. But it's it's okay. It's something. But the way that the rebates are structured is that they have two streams. They have the no audit stream, which is the heat pump, which is kind of nice if you have an old furnace and you just need a heat pump and you don't need to do anything else in your house, you can do that and you don't need to get an audit and you can get that rebate. The installer does need to be on a list of participating contractors. So and they will actually be the ones to submit the rebate for you. So you need to make sure and that you get that contractor. Then there's a second stream where you do need an audit. And the eligible things are air sealing, insulation, windows, doors, a heat pump, water heater. And you can get a $600 rebate for the audit. However, you have to do at least 2 retrofits. And the work has to be done within 180 days of the first audit. And the rebates aren't that great. Like for a window, it's $100 and you have to do at least 3. And windows are thousands of dollars. So, but some things like attics, you could get $1,200 for putting insulation in your attic, and that would cost about $2,000 to do. So, there's some good options there. Yep, next. I think so the loans. So these are super helpful. And I've worked with like so many homeowners who've taken advantage of the federal Greener Homes loan. It is 0 interest up to $40,000. It's a 10-year loan. You do need to get an audit, and then anything that the auditor says your house could use is then eligible. You do need to you need to have the money. You're not getting the money until your project is complete and you've uploaded your paid in full invoices. So you have to have kind of a bridge loan to take care of that. But you're going to get the money in the end. And I don't know anybody who hasn't been approved. There's also the City of Toronto Help Loan. This is up to $125,000 more money. They really want to encourage a deep retrofit. So more, more insulation, more sealing, bigger projects. And it has, 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. It does have an interest rate. And it's lower than, market rate. It's still around 4%. And the unique thing about the City of Toronto Help Loan, though, is it's attached to the property tax, not to you. So if you think my furnace is old, but I don't know how many years I'm going to be in this home, maybe I'll just cheap out and get another crap furnace. Don't do it. Like, get a proper heat pump, future-proof the house, and use the City of Toronto Help Loan because it's attached to the house. And then the future owner can pay off the rest of it, but they're benefiting from it. Definitely a consideration there. And then I'm not sure where everybody is who's on the webinar here today, but there are other loans from there are other programs in other jurisdictions. Guelph has some, Durham Region has some. So wherever you are, make sure that you do your research and see what's available locally. Next. And then to see how the financing can make a difference. I actually did a presentation today at the National Home Show about rebates, and I asked if I could borrow this slide from my co-presenter because it kind of illustrates that if you were looking at using, if you go with Enercare, like it's a 13.5% interest rate plus 2.5% annual inflation. They don't tell you that. They just say, oh, $84 a month. You can get 0 interest, like don't pay 13.5. Or if you do a home equity line of credit, it's around 6.5%. So, get the 0% Greener Homes loan. And then you see here, they're comparing $6,500, which would be, replacing your air conditioner, versus about 15,000, which is what a heat pump costs. And 15,000 is a lot of money. I can understand everybody's not going to be able to cough that up. However, you spread that out over the 10 years, and it's going to, he's showing it at the bottom, $36 is also, he's estimating monthly savings into that. But just to illustrate that the loan is a great help to doing this work. Next. Okay, so I probably went over time, and there's probably lots of questions. And there's one thing that I realized that I should emphasize that I didn't. you can get a heat pump in Toronto without a furnace backup, and I've had people call get 5 quotes from 5 different contractors before they started working with me, and they all said you need a furnace backup. So I'm just here to tell you, you don't need a furnace backup unless your house is so leaky, which could be a few. But for most of our homeowners in kind of leaky Toronto houses, they're fully electrified. They have a heat pump without a furnace backup, but it does have electric coil backup, usually a 5 kilowatt electric coil, and that is just kicking in on the coldest days where it's topping up. And it's not like the heat pump stops working, but if you have your thermostat set for 20 and your heat pump's getting up to 18, then the backup's going to kick in to catch you up that 2 degrees, and it will only kick in when that's needed. So just to clarify that piece about backups. Okay, I'm done. Let's hear your questions.
Thank you,
And
Michelle, for that very informative presentation. I'm going to have to rewatch this recording after and just kind of go to certain parts to pick up
Yeah,
some
I
nuggets.
packed in a lot of information there, but I thought, okay, you can go back and look, or you can reach out to me if you have questions.
Amazing. Yeah, so we'll go into the Q&A now. We have a few selected questions. So we'll do that for 10 minutes, and then the second 10 minutes we'll do to open Q&A, and that should take us right to 8. So I'll pass it off to Talia.
hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very good. We have some questions just to start us off, and then questions from participants watching. So for our first question, when it comes to heat pumps, what do you think the ideal breakdown is or responsibility is of different levels of government, like from city to provincial to federal?
Yeah, well, what we have right now is the loan from the feds, and we have the rebates from the province, and then we have a loan also from the city of Toronto. It the loan from the rebate is around 1,250 on average, and it'd be nice for it to be a bit more. The difference between getting a furnace and an air conditioner or a heat pump is about $2,000. So what we're saying to people is spend $2,000 more to get a heat pump. Well, not everybody, lots of people just want the cheapest thing. So it'd be nice if the rebates were 2,000. That's kind of the difference, and they're 1,250. So I'd like to see it be, but it's not nice to have to go to multiple organizations. So it'd be nice if the province actually just had made that amount a bit better. I don't have too high expectations of the city of Toronto because it is so burdened with already with its trying to look after all of us. So I don't have too high of expectations there. I feel like the feds and the province should do it.
Thank you for the answer. That's reasonable to assume. And then another question would be is why do homeowners actually get different information on whether it makes sense for them to get a heat pump or not during home inspections? Like, so for instance, some homeowners that are interested in heat pumps will be actually told that they're not viable by experts and inspectors or like constructors when it comes to like their home system. So why does this information kind of get passed around?
Yeah, it's pretty frustrated. Like I talked about the homeowner who'd gotten 5 quotes, all of them saying you need a furnace backup. I think it's human nature to want to do what's familiar and to do what's comfortable. And the contractors who've been doing gas their entire career, they could come in and install a furnace with their eyes closed in a couple of hours. And to do a heat pump takes a couple of days, and there's electrical, and it's different and it's more complicated. And there have also, if it's not installed correctly, it doesn't work well. And then they say, oh, heat pumps don't work. So I think we do have there's there we that the installers really need to get up to speed, and we need to push them, but there's definitely an installer gap there.
Sorry,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Hopefully we can get that information into that sphere of already working people in those sectors. And then for we already talked a bit about it that like different regions have their own programs in terms of rebates. So maybe just a brief reiteration of how these different heat pump programs compare in the cities to other municipalities in Ontario, as well as like what are they adequate? Is there any gaps missing that you'd like to see? I know you said the city of Toronto has its hands full a little bit, but is there any kind of gaps that you want to see filled in terms of, I guess, getting it out there?
Yeah, well, you're seeing some of the private sector do that, like Energy Neighbor that I work with is helping because you've got heat pump technology is ready to go and but it's like, so why aren't people doing it? So there's that help to get that one-on-one guidance to understand the technology, the loans, the rebates, et cetera. So there's an awareness thing that needs to happen, and we're seeing efforts towards that. Like Toronto Hydro has a climate action group that's trying to communicate around that. So there's an awareness building that needs to happen, but it's a challenge. Certainly, in our provincial government is very aligned with the gas industry. So they're not going to be out there telling people. Enbridge is telling people you need a gas furnace backup. And if the Doug Ford government is closely aligned, they're not going to be the ones who are going to be giving that message. So it's hard because they're powerful. And for us to combat that message is difficult. So, and that's where like you guys at Climate Pass and other organizations, it's a grassroots thing to get the word out.
Really good. Good that there's some groups doing some outreach already. And then I'm just going to group some questions together. I think you discussed that most of the brands are available on the market are Japanese or Chinese. So in the chat, somebody asked, is there a big price differential between the Japanese versus Chinese units? And then somebody also mentioned that they had an Ilios, which was made in China, that they never had a problem with it, and just kind of wanted to know your thoughts on that brand.
Yeah, that's great. So yep, the Ilios would the Chinese brands, if they're well installed, are good, are good. And it's great because they have brought the price down. So you can get a one of the Chinese heat pumps for around like $15,000, 14, 15, and the Japanese are going to be closer to 20. And that's a pretty big price differential. Fujitsu maybe, and I'm talking about like a typical centrally ducted heat pump, say 13, 14, 15 for a Chinese, and then 18, 19, 20 for one of the Japanese.
Mhm. And then somebody was asking if you have any information for multi-residential units. So I guess even a lot of people in Toronto don't have their own homes, so they're talking condos, apartments, or like housing co-ops. Is there routes for those?
Yeah, so like this current rebate program that I'm talking about is not available to those people, but there are programs. Uh, um, and Yeah, they're not, I don't have them at top of mind, but I can refer people. There is actually, I was at the home show today, and there's a woman there who specializes in that, and I would be happy to connect people with her to provide more information. Because for sure that can be a challenge dealing with condo boards and all of that. And it's really important that everybody starts moving in this direction.
Sounds good. At least there's options for people to take and
There
think
are.
into. That's
Yep.
great. And then one person was just wondering with the help loans attached to the title of the property, have you encountered any people who actually have trouble selling their homes because of this? I think they said some homeowners are concerned about this.
Yeah, I could totally understand. I think that you would limit your pool of buyers. I think there would be some people who wouldn't be as interested. You would end up selling it to somebody who values that you've electrified the house. I do know some homeowners who did sell their homes with this. One woman in particular who had done a beautiful job of electrifying her home, and the buyer was thrilled to come into a house where it was already done. Because it's a lot of work to do it. Like any of us who are working on it incrementally, it's a lot of work. So to have it done. But yes, I imagine that it would limit the interest. Given how much interest there is in most of our homes here, fortunately, if you have 500 people interested in your home rather than 1,000, maybe you're still okay. But yeah.
Good. And then this question, it might be more of a question for like an installer, but I think someone asked, is backup electric coils really needed in Toronto if they get rid of their gas furnace? I think they keep their set point, they said at 18 degrees Celsius. Do they need backup electric
So that
coils?
totally depends on your house.
Yeah.
So my brother-in-law who lives in Ottawa, which is much colder than here, um, never has backup installed, but it has never kicked in. But he completely gutted and renoed and insulated and air sealed his house. So
Mhm.
if your home is reasonably tight, if it has, say, 5 air changes per hour or less, you may not need a backup at all. But if you have a more leaky house, then that means you're just going to have what's a higher heat load, meaning there's more required to keep your house warm. So that would be, you need to evaluate that. It's really not a big deal to add in like the 5 kilowatt backup coil. They're even included. There's a slot for it. It looks like a little toaster. It's the equivalent of like 3.5 space heaters, and it doesn't cost much. So it's just good insurance to have it.
Yeah, I'd like just good to have a backup in case of anything. And then I think this is a really good question. Ontario is planning to add 5 gas plants to provide electricity. And this seems to the person that it cancels out the benefits of like homeowners getting the heat pump. Does it? Is this like a big concern? Like, is there any action maybe that we can take to kind of
Yeah, for sure. So, we used to have only like 7% of dirty energy, and now it's closer to 15. So we're definitely going the wrong way. However, 15% is pretty good. So you still have, 85% clean energy. So I would say absolutely it makes sense to electrify and use 85% clean energy, because your gas furnace is 100% dirty. So if you switch over and it's 15% dirty, you're absolutely improving the situation. It's a huge emissions reduction and a huge improvement. And like I have a friend in Alberta who was like, Michelle, should I get a heat pump? It's like they're 100% dirty there. So, even then, if you have hope that there'll be clean energy coming online in the lifespan of your 15 to 20 years of your unit, then go for it. Alberta, maybe not, but some places like Texas is getting way cleaner because, so anyway, it depends on your local, but here in Ontario, we're really clean.
Mhm. It's like the give and the take of what yes, you're going to lose some areas, but then you're going to gain in others. So whatever percentage you can get back. That's good. And then I'm just going to see here. I'll combine these questions. I think you kind of already discussed this, but if you have a relatively new furnace, is there a reason aside from environmental benefits to get heat pump? I'd assume financial benefits, but then also somebody asked, are heat pumps harder to service and repair than a furnace? Or do we have any baseline of comparison for that?
Yeah, so actually they're easier to service and repair. The furnace is burning, it's combusting, and it creates acid as a byproduct, which can and condensation, which over the years can ruin the heat exchanger, and that then needs to be replaced. Or when the heat exchanger goes, usually the whole furnace has to be replaced. So there's no combustion and in a heat pump. It's basically an air conditioner with a reversing valve. And you guys know air conditioners that have gone for 40 years. Like if they're well installed, and there really is the maintenance is like spray off the outdoor unit, get pollen and crap out of it. And then maybe every couple of years, somebody could kind of clean off the coils and make sure the gaskets are fine. But it's it's low maintenance. Um, I think the earlier part was about the hybrid heat pump and the advantage. So the hybrid heat pump is replacing an air conditioner, but for some people who don't have an air conditioner, that's a bonus because you're putting that in and now you're getting AC and you're getting most of your heating is now being done by the heat pump, which is clean energy, as we said, to not use the gas as little as possible. Let the heat pump do most of the work. So the big advantage there is to get the AC and to have clean energy. Or you could remove an AC. Like if you have a new furnace and older AC, get rid of the AC, put in the heat pump, and then now you've got that much cleaner energy. I've actually known people who put a heat pump on top of a furnace and cut the gas line. So they're using the blower and the fan from the furnace to blow over the coils. And the reason to do that is because it's half the cost. Like you were saying, a heat pump's around 15,000 bucks. If you do a hybrid, it's going to be around 7.
Okay, that's good to know. So there's benefits in multiple areas. I think the next couple of questions, I'm just going to, they're mostly about like, I think multi-unit homes and if rebates apply to condos, townhouses, and I think people saying like, what about condos? So I think just to reiterate, you said you'll be able to share resources on those, but for now you were just discussing single townhouses, right?
Yeah, so for a townhouse, they are eligible if you own the townhouse. But
Like
unfortunately,
condo.
condos are not, at least not the program that the programs that I'm talking about here.
Okay, and then someone had a specific question when they said, I live in the country and had a wood burning stove with electric heat as a backup. Would they be eligible for that $7,000 rebate, which again, you previously mentioned that that is kind of a little bit misleading. And then they asked if we also have to be an Enbridge customer. And if I could go in, I study soot. I think you should just get rid of the heat wood burning stove because that is really bad for you. And I'm sorry. But sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so if your home is primarily heated with electric resistance heat, and it sounds like you could maybe say that it is, then you are eligible for the larger rebates. Now, it's not going to be fully 7,500 because that would be for a 6-ton heat pump, and the price is per half ton or per ton. But say you got a 3-ton heat pump, you would be eligible for half that amount. So for sure, that is worth looking in if you think you can legitimately say that your house is that's primary heating is electric. So you kind of you would it would have to be not primarily heated by the wood stove.
Sounds good. Hopefully that helps give some direction. I think we went over most of the question. I'm just seeing this new one. Okay, so I guess I'm just going to combine these two. Someone mentioned they're avoiding American products. So was there other brands other than high-end Carrier that you mentioned that they could go with? I think to reiterate, I think you mentioned that a lot of them are already just Japanese or Chinese products, and then that a brand over in here would kind of slap their name on it. So I guess which
Yeah.
non-American.
There might be some other. I'm the only one I'm familiar with is the high-end Carrier one that's made in Texas.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
So, but keep your eyes on it because as I said, the major brands, they weren't up to speed on heat pump technology, so they just paid the Chinese to make it for them. But some of them are intending to start pulling it in to their own manufacturing process. And if the government south of us decides to emphasize American manufacturing, then they might create some incentives for that to happen. So keep your eyes on it. But yeah, right now, mostly Japanese and Chinese.
And then last question, and then we can close up. And then when narrowing the pool of potential installers, how do you know if the company has a lot of experience in heat pump installation, and is there any certification involved? I know you talked a little bit about it, but if you want to go over that again.
Yeah. So for the new rebate program, they're actually requiring that contractors are on a list and they have to submit their refrigeration certificate, which is great, I think, actually. But the company can submit that from one person and then it could maybe fudge a bit. What I would do is I would actually ask for references and I would ask for a lot of them. I would get at least 5 to say people who have the same heat pump that you're recommending for me installed. And even then, like with the big companies, they could have somebody who's experienced installer and somebody who's not. So I actually like going with the small companies where you know who, like the owner was the one who installed it.
Mhm.
Which is just what I found to be reliable. But for sure, check references and ask them. Say, I want somebody who's had their heat pump for at least 2 winters to make sure that it performed adequately that did what it's supposed to do.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a good main takeaway is like heat pumps do work. You just have to make sure you're getting them installed is like what I'm hearing a lot. So thank you so much, Michelle. I think I'll pass it off to Anna to close up.
Thanks, Talia, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm just going to close off here and say some thank yous and also share some links. We have some events at Climate Fast coming up and just want to loop people in and inform people. So yeah, I thought this was very informative. Thank you so much, Michelle. There was so much here I didn't know, and we really are on the path to transition. Go through the energy transition. So this is super important. And most of my family members are on natural gas furnaces still. So this is something that I think we can take back and inform either our friends or family members and others. So thank you. And we also have a tech team. So Ray is here, and Sharon and Linda, and of course Talia. There were a lot of people who helped in the background to make this all possible and flow well. So thank you. And then just want to share if you want to talk to Michelle or I guess get him just talk to anyone at Climate Fest. We will be tabling at a farmers market on Saturday, March 22nd. So if you want to come say hello at our table, we will be there. And it's right by so it's at Witchwood Farmers Market. If you want to stop by anywhere between 9 a.m. or noonish, at least I will be there and a couple others too. And then as in terms of Climate Fast, I'm going to just share some links in the chat of some things we're working on. And if you're interested in getting involved, feel free to email us at info@climatefast.ca. But one of the projects is the voting records project. So we just launched a website where you can track how your local councilor is voting on climate policies at City Hall each month, rather than going through the database and doing a lot of research to track it. This website helps do that for you. So feel free to play around and check it out. And then the second thing is the Wards Project. So that's an ongoing project that's happening at Climate Fast. And if you go to the link, I'll just put it in the chat here to learn more about what that project is about. It's building relationships with your local counselor, and it's just getting started. So if you go to that link on the Toronto Climate Action Network website, at the very bottom, there's information on the Wards project, and that will take you to a form. And I will just in case put the form in the chat as well. So those are our two main projects, the voting records website, and then the Wards project with the building a relationship with the counselor. So yeah, that's everything. Thank you very much for coming, and we will stay in touch.